Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this webinar, where we're going to discuss ethical hacking versus penetration testing versus cybersecurity and compare some of the differences between them. Andreas and I would also like to take this opportunity and thank PECB for organizing this event. We're extremely happy to be here today. So let's begin with a few words about Andreas and myself. My name is Carl Carpenter, and I'm a consultant for Arrakis Consulting, with headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona, where it's very early right now, and with global operations. My main responsibilities are to support our clients in all matters relating to cybersecurity, with an emphasis on regulated environments such as CMMC, GDPR, HIPAA, and so on. I'm also a PECB instructor for ISO 27001 and CMMC Foundations. Andreas, turning it over to you.
Thank you very much, Carl. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Andreas Christoforides, and I'm the Business Development Manager at the BWise Cyprus. My main responsibilities are to deliver to our clients a wide range of cybersecurity projects in the areas of strategy, governance and risk management, data privacy and protections, business resilience and recovery. I'm also a PCB instructor for ISO 22301, 27001, GDPR, and soon for ethical hacker courses. This topic is of great interest to me as well, and we do hope you will enjoy it. So today we'll talk about some of the differences and similarities about ethical hacking and penetration testing. We'll see some types and stages of penetration testing, which is actually one of the most interesting part of our presentation. We're going to discuss about cybersecurity and impact of COVID-19 on cybersecurity, how to get involved, meaning what are the stages if you wish to become a pen tester, why is this a big deal, and things to watch out for. And at the end of the presentation, we'll be happy to take some questions. Well, we have seen today that a lot of people and even organizations are still confusing these two, ethical hackers and penetration testers. But believe me, they have their differences. All the organizations, when they hire an ethical hacker or a penetration tester, they always make them wear the same hat. Of course, the similarities those two are using are usually the same operating systems and tools. And I'm talking about Kali Linux or Ubuntu. But we're not going to discuss today the tools being used, especially using those operating systems. But I'm quite sure that a lot of people here today came across Kali Linux before. One of the main differences, and hopefully at the end of this presentation, we have some questions about that. Ethical hackers always have a visibility to organizations' infrastructure, where penetration testers are generally provided with limited or no information of organizations' infrastructure.
Right, Andreas. In many organizations, ethical hackers are not even involved in the penetration testing process or involved in the penetration testing teams. Across many government organizations, ethical hacking is used to build the foundations of computer network exploitation from the standpoint of a bad actor. While these teams are highly offensive and very specialized, they will most likely never be part of an actual penetration test. Their tactical cyber skills are highly coveted and take years to develop. In other organizations, ethical hackers could be used for a wide variety of jobs to augment networks, network security, or methods by which tools and protocols communicate. So ethical hacking is an act of intruding into a system to uncover threats or vulnerabilities that a bad actor or malicious individual or group of malicious individuals could find and exploit that could cause some sort of loss of data, increased risk to the company, financial loss, or anything along the lines could, put the company in the news and in a bad light. The purpose of ethical hacking is to improve the security of the network or the systems on the network by fixing those vulnerabilities before they become exploited or even uncovered by the bad actor to get exploited. So in simple words,
sorry for interrupting. Just if you can get closer to your microphone, because I think the audience cannot hear you very well. Sorry.
All right. Okay. So in simple words, ethical hacking is also a practice. The skills employed by an ethical hacker allow them to practice a continuous assessment cycle of an organization's security posture by employing the same tools, tactics, techniques, methods that a bad actor could possibly use against the company. Ethical hackers often have deep knowledge of the organization and its vulnerabilities, as well as its vulnerability management approach, the risk tolerances, the risk acceptance from leadership, and so on. So understanding these possible weaknesses, these ethical hackers can then utilize the same methods and tools that a bad actor would use to exploit those weaknesses. This process allows organizations to test the company systems, the vulnerabilities, security measures, the processes that other departments may go through in order to protect the company, to help identify risk and deploy, defensive technologies or some sort of maybe change a process in order to reduce the risk of the vulnerability. The very nature of hacking is to use a system in such a way that it's not intended to be used to produce an outcome that's, again, not intended. It's good to mention that ethical hacking is completely legal, but not completely legal in all countries or locations, and is one of the highest paid and fastest growing professions in information technology today. Quite often, an ethical hacker would work as an employee in an organization or possibly a security firm, a third-party security firm, or maybe by themselves as an independent security consultant. Andreas, can you introduce us to penetration testing, please?
Certainly. Now, penetration testing, on the other hand, is a coordinated assessment process, usually performed by a team, generally contracted. The organization defines the scope of what is to be tested and reported. The test involves a variety of items, but for the simplicity of explanation, an individual or team under contract will approach a system, assess the entire system for vulnerabilities or weaknesses through a predefined methodological approach. So in many cases, in many times, those vulnerabilities are exploited in a controlled manner to identify the risk to the organization. From this point, a pen tester will prepare a comprehensive report that includes an executive summary, vulnerability classification documents describing the issues in the system tested, along with exploitation records showing what threat those vulnerabilities, if exploited, pose to the organization. With the executive summary, vulnerability classification and exploitation results, recommended remediation strategies can be documented and shared in detail with key organization stakeholders in the form of a pen test report. Penetration tests are valuable for a variety of reasons. The most common are security, maturity, and risk management. And this is a proactive approach many organizations take to identify their own weaknesses before criminals do. Most commonly, however, penetration tests are used for compliance auditing, and sometimes it's even mandatory for an organization. Now you may notice also the physical or humans, and here we would like to note that penetration testers can also use, as hackers call it, the art of human hacking or social engineering. In the context of information security, social engineering is the psychological manipulation of people into performing actions or divulging confidential information. Of course, this method in this case won't be malicious. The penetration tester does not wish to harm the organization or the person. The main purpose of the penetration tester is to check the awareness of organization users. And to be honest, one of the main attack methods hackers are using is phishing. So the awareness of the users should always be among the top priorities. Let's move forward with Carl to dive a little bit deeper and view some types of pen testing.
So amongst penetration testing, we have numerous types, and we'll go over each one briefly. It's also important to note that you can have a combination of penetration test types while engaging in penetration. So maybe you're not just doing one type, you're doing multiple versions. So the first one we'll talk about is an open box pen test. In an open box pen test, the pen tester or the penetration tester will be provided with some sort of information ahead of time regarding the target company's security information or security posture. Sometimes, at least in my case, I've found that companies will request an open box pen test because they already know they have a weakness and they just want to see how you can exploit it. And instead of spending as much time on reconnaissance and compromising, they already know what the vulnerability is, and they just want to reduce cost by saving the time for the pen tester. The next one is a closed box pen test. This is quite often known as a single blind test, and this is where the penetration tester or the hacker is given pretty much no background information about the target company other than the name of the target company. This is used quite often. It's very common. We also have a covert pen test. A covert pen test is when it's also known as a double-blind pen test for some people. This is pretty much the same thing as a closed box pen test, except for the fact that inside the company that's being attacked, no one is aware that a penetration test is being performed. And quite often, this is used for the target company to be able to exercise other departments within the company to find out how they would react if it was an actual attack from a bad actor. So in this case, if a penetration test is going on, the company could see how the IT department is going to react, how the security department is going to react. If there's a case of phishing or something like that, what level of training needs to be adjusted, and so on. So for covert tests, it's especially important for the pen tester to have the scope of the penetration test and completely understand that scope with absolutely no confusion. And most importantly, every bit of that scope is written down in a contract to make sure that all parties are protected. Unfortunately, if a pen tester goes out of the scope, then there could be some legal issues that the penetration tester could be facing. We also have another form of pen testing, which is more on the technical side, but it's the external pen test. In an external pen test, that's where basically the penetration tester or the ethical hacker is attacking everything that's what's known as public facing. So anything on the internet would be fair game on an external pen test, that so long as those targets on the public facing side of the company are actually owned by the company. But even then, we have to narrow down what actually can be attacked. So if the company, for example, has a virtual server that's public facing that is in the Amazon cloud, you can't necessarily attack that because that's also attacking Amazon. We have to coordinate and make sure that we're safe. Quite often for external pen tests, the penetration tester, once they compromise something that's external, they're given explicit instructions to not proceed further or to gain permission to continue and then convert it into the next section or the next type, which is an internal pen test. So once you compromise something that's external, then you have to stop and to make sure you have permission to continue into the inside of the network. External pen test can also have a different type of pen test in relation to not only what's on the internet, but what available. If a company has a Wi-Fi network and you can access that Wi-Fi network from the parking lot or a road or something, then you could exercise a Wi-Fi tax against the company to see if you could get in. We also have an internal pen test. An internal pen test is viewed from the standpoint of what a disgruntled employee could do to the target company, and performs those attacks on the inside. And then we also have a physical pen test, and the physical pen test is really where we're getting into how can we break into the company's target location? How can we get inside the building? This very commonly is tailgating. If you could clone badges, if they have smart badges, you can clone those. Most pen testers that do this also understand how to pick locks. They understand the mechanical features of restrictive devices like magnetic doors or motion sensors and so on. Personally, in the pen testing that I do, I normally do a closed box, external, internal, and physical pen test for each engagement. But for each engagement, I also encourage the client to include the covert factor of the pen test, so they get more value for the money that they're spending. Andreas, want to guide us through the stages?
Certainly, thank you. At the stages, we have planning and reconnaissance. So defining the scope and goals of this pen test, including the systems to be addressed and the testing methods to be used. At this stage, when conducting a meeting to defining the scope, always make sure that you have the management commitment on this one. Make sure they understand the real value of the penetration test. So at this stage, gathering intelligence is a must to be able to better understand how a target works and its potential vulnerabilities. Information about servers, domain names, mail servers, IP addresses, network access storages, switches, you name it, routers, operating systems, or even firmware versions. In the scanning phase, pen testers step forward to start singling out possible areas of attack against their target. This is also the first phase in which a target can identify that they have been attacked. So definitely going to see some firewalls start flashing. Assuming that the target has appropriate security in place, that is, for example, a firewall or an intrusion detection system. Usually, pen testers will start scanning the network to get a general idea of what actual targets are available for further exploitation. And they use tools such as Nmap, which is a free and open source network scanner. Nmap is used to discover hosts and services on a computer network. So pen testers will begin to gather information about the target's purpose. They will identify what port it has open and possibly what services it offers. At gaining access, this stage uses web application attacks, such as cross-site scripting, our favor SQL injection, and backdoors to uncover a target's vulnerabilities. Testers then try to exploit these vulnerabilities, typically by escalating privileges, stealing data, intercepting traffic, able to understand the damage they can cause. And usually in such cases, the target can also be a firewall or even a server. Maintaining access, the goal of this stage is to see if the vulnerability can be used to achieve a persistent presence in the exploited system. It's very important that the penetration testers need to maintain continued access to your system, even if the system is rebooted, reset, or modified. Pen testers at this stage need to think like a hacker. What does a hacker badly want? He needs to live into your system for long periods of time to steal your data. That's why in cases of a ransomware attack, it's not recommended to actually pay the hacker for the encryption key. No, because there is a huge chance he's still alive in your system. After completion of of all the above penetration testing steps, the final step is to collect evidence for the exploited vulnerabilities and report submissions to the organization head for review and necessary action. Now it is the time for management's decision on how these vulnerabilities or risk has to be addressed. If the managements don't take any action or ignoring these risks, then the system will be vulnerable. It's here when one of the most important questions coming from IT auditors or to the general management is, are you willing to accept the risk? That means the system is not secure and will be targeted by attackers. So the report will include the overall summary of penetration testing and details of each step, information gathered during the penetration test, all the vulnerabilities exploited during the test, assessed of sensitive data during the test, important suggestions for ensure security. So cyber attack, it's no longer a question of if, it's a matter of when. Let's continue now to see the cybersecurity part.
Cybersecurity is the protection of internet connected systems, such as hardware, software, or data, from various cyber threats or vulnerabilities, bad actors, malicious parties, and so on. And this practice is used by individuals and enterprises to protect against unauthorized access to data centers and other computerized systems. Doesn't really matter what it is, you just have to protect it. So a strong cybersecurity strategy can provide a company a good security posture against malicious attacks designed to either alter or steal or delete, or maybe encrypt so they can extort an organization of their data in some form or fashion, or maybe request a ransom. Cybersecurity is also instrumental in preventing attacks that aim to disrupt a system or device used by the company, such as distributed denial of service or just a simple denial of service. Doesn't really matter if you're preventing the access to that device and the company is affected in a bad way. So the term cybersecurity can apply to a variety of contexts, from businesses to mobile computing, can be divided in multiple categories and so on. So a few of these categories. So the first one we'll talk about is network security. And that's the practice of securing a computer network from intruders, whether it's a targeted attacker or some sort of opportunistic malware, some sort of, or it could be even a malicious insider. That's why we have permissions and so on inside the network. We also have application security, which focuses on keeping software devices free of threats, devices that run the application free of threats that could affect that application. So a compromised application could provide access to data that was not designed to be accessed by everyone or even specific individuals. So think of like a SQL injection attack, which allows you to input a command and you can receive all sorts of data that you're normally not supposed to get. Successful security begins in the design stages, well before that application is deployed. And unfortunately, quite a few companies, they kind of flip this around. They do it backwards. They design the application, then they deploy it, and then they wait for other people to tell them that there's a problem with the application, then they go fix it. So that's generally not a good idea. It's not considered best practice now, or in today's world. Information security protects the integrity and privacy of the data, both in storage and in transit. Information security is found in every regulatory environment at a broad sense, and it's up to the company to translate that into what is needed in order to protect the information. We also have operational security, and this includes the administrative controls such as policies, standards, or procedures in order to protect the company, regardless, again, if the threat is internal to the company or if the threat is external to the company. So this would be the permissions users have when accessing a network, and then whatever procedures are used, written and used in order to determine how data is going to be stored, how it's going to be transmitted, how it's going to be shared, and so on. And I find that in a regulatory environment, policies are the foundation of cybersecurity in a holistic sense. So policies absolutely are part of the supporting the technical side of information security. We also have disaster recovery and business continuity. And this defines how a company is going to be able to respond to a cyber event, whether it's internal or external, or anything else that could cause the loss of that company's operations or the data. So disaster recovery policies will dictate how the company is going to restore its operations and so on in order to return to the same operating status as before the event. And it doesn't matter what the disaster is, whether it's a tsunami or it's a hacker attack. Business continuity is the plan that the organization falls back on while trying to operate without specific resources inside of that the company would normally use. So for example, if the company relies on Amazon to function, and then, you know, it's hard to believe that Amazon would go down, but let's pretend that they did go down. How is the company going to continue operating? So there has to be like a backup plan. However, the most important thing about cybersecurity, as Andreas pointed out, with human hacking, are the people itself. Anyone can accidentally, you know, click on the link, introduce a virus that they found because they found a USB drive in the parking lot or the bathroom or something. Plug it in because they're curious to see what's on that USB drive. Anyone can do that. But a well-trained person is less likely to do that. Unfortunately, or fortunately from my standpoint, for every single pen testing engagement I've been on, I've been able to compromise a human being in such a way that it was almost easier to compromise a human being than the actual network. I've never not been able to do that. It's happened every single time. So what we can do is to reduce this risk is teach companies how to teach their people in relation to cybersecurity, not clicking the link in the email that says you won $1 million, not plugging in USB drives and so on, and teaching them some of the tactics around phishing, or even other forms of phishing like spear phishing or whaling, or if somebody calls you on the cell phone and asks questions, which is extremely effective. So you're probably thinking now, what's the difference between cybersecurity and penetration testing? So firstly, cybersecurity consists of practically everything in order to protect a company against a hostile party. And however, penetration testing is much more targeted, it's much more focused. So cybersecurity is a wide range of security-related events to protect the company, and penetration testing is more like a laser beam in relation to trying to break in. Cybersecurity has to look at everything a company has. A penetration tester only has to look for the weak spots and then exploit those weak spots. So, and once a penetration tester has exploited those weak spots and generated a report and so on, then that report should detail to the cybersecurity team how can we prevent that from happening. So let's move forward to see how COVID-19 impacted cybersecurity.
It's also very important, like everything else, being impacted by COVID-19 to see how cybersecurity was also one of them. As organizations move away from their physical premises and become increasingly reliant on remote access technology, any disruption caused by cybersecurity attacks or IT outages will have a significantly greater operational impact. Organizations will become increasingly reliant on remote access technology, including technology their employees are not familiar using. And let's be honest, with the little notice, we all ended up working remotely, and we were not all fortunate to have VPN access or office equipment. We have been using personal devices, using more video conferencing, and some of us didn't even knew what's a conference call or even how to install these applications. So what happened eventually? Hackers found the perfect opportunity. 40% of individuals fall for a phishing scam while working at home. And we can see these attacks every single day. Every single day. Cyber attackers see the pandemic as an opportunity to step up their criminal activities by exploiting the vulnerability of employees working from home. It's really interesting to see in Switzerland in April 2020, there were 350 reported cases of cyber attacks. That's phishing, fraudulent websites, direct attacks on companies. The coronavirus pandemic and increasing working from home were seen as a major cause of this increase, since individuals working at home do not enjoy the same level of protection measures from working environment. They're not sitting behind a firewall, an IDS, or a secure network. They're working from home. So on top of cybersecurity, we need to address the human weaknesses and implement suitable working from home policies and policies regarding social media and bring your own device risks. There is a need for plain language advice to staff and training and appropriate monitoring. Clearly, cybersecurity will continue to be an area of potential vulnerability in the coming months as hackers evolve their methods and chase new targets in an effort to gain access to price data. The value of big data sets is only ever increasing. This means the organizations which might not have been an obvious target previously could now be of more interest to hackers. Those data sets are valuable to hackers for a number of reasons, of course. In response to COVID-19, more organizations are now collecting data that they have not traditionally had to process, meaning hackers may see these as soft targets whose cyber defenses may be weaker than some of the more institutional targets, such as banks, universities, and government departments. In other words, hackers will continue to exploit the uncertainty caused by COVID-19. It is crucial now that companies act to embed cybersecurity into their culture and remain vigilant. Let's see now how move forward and see how to get involved. Pen testing of any type is built on understanding the basics of networking, all the way down to how computers work. IP subnetting doesn't change regardless of the vendor. ACL concepts are the same. So get started with certifications that are more focused on network engineering or IT support that can go a very long way in being an effective pen tester. Start, for example, with fundamentals of networking. Configure a workstation to connect to a network. Use Cisco Packet Tracer that allows users to create network topologies and imitate modern computer networks. This software allows users to simulate the configuration of Cisco routers and switches using a simulated command line interface. There are tons of videos online available, by the way, to get your hands on regarding Cisco Packet Tracer, and it's free at some certain point. Configure a Wi-Fi router, including security, SSID, a Wi-Fi channel. Do you have a Wi-Fi router at home? Play with it, mess with it. Learn various IP addressing considerations, learn subnetting, and eventually move into a CCNA course to enchant more your knowledge about networking. Windows operating systems. 90% of organizations and users today are using Windows, let's be honest. Definitely learn everything you can on Windows Server environment. Active Directory infrastructure, how to add users, organization units, groups, and how to configure group policies, how to deploy and configure DHCP and DNS, learn about Hyper-V, about VM, backups. I know very well some of the things that I have mentioned take years to learn and master, but this is the path to follow further to become a pen tester. I'm quite sure that most of you would like to know more about Kali for sure. Kali Linux is an open source Debian-based Linux distribution. It's aimed to advance penetration testing and security auditing. It contains several hundred tools targeted towards virus information security tasks such as penetration testing, of course, security research, forensics, reverse engineering, you name it. And it's a multi-platform solution, accessible and freely available to information security professionals. I'm going to be honest, you have to be really careful with Kali Linux. It's also a loaded weapon. If you are unfamiliar with Linux, generally, if you do not have at least a basic level of competence in administering a system, if you're looking for a Linux distribution to use as a learning tool to get to know around Kali Linux, then Kali Linux is probably not what you're looking for. Misuse of security and penetration testing tools within a network, particularly without specific authorization, may cause irreparable damage and result in significant consequences. Install a VM, a virtual machine on your computer. It's not a bad idea to have a Windows server, for example, or even Kali Linux to start with. At least if something goes wrong, you can scratch the VM and start over again. I think now VMware, you're allowed to install up to one single machine, depending on the RAM of your computer, of course, and the processor. Getting an auditor certification also helps as well, because when you deliver the report, it carries more weight. ISO 27001, for example, assists you to understand the practical approaches that are involved in the implementation of an information security management system that preserves the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the triad of information by applying a risk management process. Therefore, implementation of an information security management system that complies with all requirements of ISO 27001 enables your organizations to assess and treat information security risk that they face. However, one of the most important things is to understand the laws around pen testing. Pen testing in the wrong environment can land you in jail. Ensure you have solid contracts that are irrefutable. Some country laws can land you in hot water simply by having hacking tools, which bears the question, exactly what is hacking tool? As a good pen testers can use a wide variety of tools to accomplish the missions. Let's move now into something also very interesting. And why is this a big deal?
So this is my favorite slide. So why is this a big deal, and why should we care? Firstly, in the United States, for example, there is currently no regulatory environment that doesn't require penetration testing of some sort. And every single regulatory environment requires adequate cybersecurity. So this means jobs and job opportunities. So even in unregulated environments, if you wanted to have a recognizable accreditation for a company such as ISO 27001, then it's a lot easier to impress the auditors if you had a pen test done in advance. And that's great. I love that. Penetration testers also have a unique mind and skill set in approaching a pen test, while generalized cybersecurity people do not, because generalized cybersecurity people look at the whole picture and a pen tester looks at one part of it. However, having said that, a pen tester most likely was a generalized cybersecurity person before they became a pen tester. To go down the same path that Andreas mentioned with learning about cybersecurity and information technology. I love this part, but the vulnerabilities are being discovered faster and exploited faster than people can be trained or those vulnerabilities remediated. New zero-day vulnerabilities are coming out all the time. This simply means that there's never not going to be work. There's always going to be something to do, and so on. And as a penetration tester, you're never truly going to know every single thing because something new is being invented every single day. So because of the constant pace of vulnerabilities and trying to remediate them, this is going to require a cybersecurity workforce to always think outside of the box, never become complacent. They're always going to have to think every day is a new day. They're always going to have to learn new things. And this is good for them, for a cybersecurity team, as well as a penetration tester. But I want to emphasize the last bullet for sure. As of February 2021, this year, in the United States, there were 314,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs and 3.5 million globally. This means there's going to be work, there's going to be employment, there's going to be money that can come into a person who chooses to go down this path. In comparison of 3.5 million globally, 2014 are only 1 million unfilled. So you can see the trend moving upwards in relation to the requirements of needing penetration testers and cybersecurity people. And then you also have the various governments across the entire planet that require penetration testers and experienced cybersecurity personnel in order to meet the regulatory environments. And if those companies don't do that, then they get fined or other liabilities that could happen to them. So essentially, the whole focus of this slide is that there's employment that's available. And at this point, I think we're done with our slide deck, and Andreas and I can accept some questions.
Okay, thank you, Andreas and Carl, for delivering this very informative and detailed webinar. PECB offers training and certification courses which will show your dedication in implementing and managing privacy-related frameworks, and most importantly, you will get recognized worldwide. Before moving on with the Q&A session, I'm just happy to inform you that the newest PECB training course, Ethical Hacking, is coming soon. And if you are interested to know more about this training course, please check the link in the chat box. Now we'll go ahead and take some time to answer some of the questions from the attendees. The first question is, are organizations protected by GDPR from ethical hackers or penetration testing?
I'm sorry, say again?
Are organizations protected by GDPR from ethical hackers or penetration testing?
No, if an organization falls under GDPR, there is language in GDPR that requires them to get penetration testing. It's somewhat vague in how it's written, but it is a requirement. You really have to understand GDPR, which is obviously a hot topic nowadays, much like CCPA is for California businesses. But the short answer is yes, if you are GDPR, you have to, unfortunately, you have to have penetration testing.
Okay. The second question is, how does one make a transition from being a cybersecurity expert to a pen tester? Basically moving from defensive to offensive.
So the good thing about about that, if you're on the defense as a cybersecurity person, then it's somewhat easy to switch to the offense because you already know how you're defending a company from an offensive person. Realistically, what you probably should do, if assuming you understand the basics, so you understand the OSI model, the TCP/IP stack, and so on, VLAN, subnetting, and all that good stuff. If you understand that, then what I would suggest you do is build a test environment or find a test environment, maybe with some friends or whatever, and then create common vulnerabilities, replicate the vulnerabilities that are common today, and then try to exploit those, create lab environments and then attack those lab environments. And then after you've attacked them and you exploited it, patch the vulnerability and then attack it again and see the differences and so on, or even try a different way of attacking that exact same lab environments. There are systems out there. You can get, there's pen testing sites on the internet where you can intentionally attack a known location. They build it for penetration testers to attack the location, so you can attack those. But there's also VMs that you can download from the internet that are vulnerable to begin with, and they're designed as a test bed for future pen testers to practice their skills on.
Okay, the next question is, could you please recommend us any literature as a starting point to get introduced into pen testing?
Oh, any literature? You could probably go to the Kali Linux website. That's a really great start. I personally have some books that I ordered off of Amazon years ago, like the red team methodology, blue team methodology. So red is the pen tester, blue is the defense. There's a ton of books you can get on off of Amazon or some other locations. But don't be afraid to look at websites for other penetration testers, like Offensive Security. Look at that one. That's the Kali one. They'll have a lot of material on there. However, to kind of move down the line a little bit, you can read all you want, but you have to practice. And sometimes some people just don't read very well. They have to be in a classroom situation. So obviously, I would recommend the ethical hacker course that PECB is offering.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what are the requirements for working towards being a pen tester?
That depends on who the client is. I think that's kind of a vague question. You could have, from the client standpoint, so for example, if you're trying to do penetration testing for the United States government, you have to have certain certifications. You have to hold them. You have to be certified in order to work. And the U.S. government does this across the board for even IT support. But it also depends on what country you're in. So, for example, in Australia, if you have hacking tools on your system because you want to become a pen tester, but you're not a pen tester, then technically you're breaking the law. The Australian law, because they have rules around what software tools a person can have. So if you'll remember, Andrea said that there's the question, what is a hacking tool? You have to really think about that. Other countries are much less strict, and you could probably just say, hey, I'm a pen tester, and see if you can get somebody to hire you. Having said that, if you're not actually a pen tester, but calling yourself one, you're going to lose a lot of money and a lot of business, because eventually they'll find out.
Okay. Which is a more effective?
Can I add something here as well, Visa, by the way,
Yes, of course.
For the qualifications required for pen testing, especially in a variety of countries in Europe, you are not allowed to conduct a pen testing if you don't have this sort of certifications, and you will need also to provide proof of several projects that you have done in the past in similar environments. For example, if you are specialized in pen testing in bank industry or in maritime, you need to provide evidence that you have done these penetration testings before, able to even participate in this proposal, in this project, let's say. So without the qualifications and without proof, usually in the maritime industry, you are required, I think, several hundreds of hours in pen testing in able to allow you actually to get on board the ship.
Thank you, Andreas. The next question is, which is a more effective test of a company's security, the use of ethical hacking or pen testing?
Oh, they both go together. There's no one answer for that one. A good pen tester can compromise a company fairly easy, and a good ethical hacker can expose vulnerabilities to prevent that pen tester coming in. You really want to have both teams. A pen tester attacking a company and the company doesn't have some sort of previous ethical hacking activity going on, probably going to have a fairly easy time of breaking in, versus a company that has ethical hackers to help them out with their security. If they don't have a penetration tester attempt to break in, then they really haven't been tested, and they don't really know if that ethical hacker is doing a good job.
Okay, the next question is, when you conduct a pen test, is there a possibility that you fail in your pen test report or analysis because the cybersecurity system is so solid?
That is absolutely a possibility. That's never happened to me, but I have heard of it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing either. If a cybersecurity posture for a company is absolutely so solid that a pen tester can't get in, the penetration tester is still obligated to try to do everything. But in the end, if they can't get in, they should write a report with all of their findings, whether they're bad or they're good. If there's any suggestions for improvement, even if the pen tester didn't get in, that's totally acceptable. But like I said, I've never had that happen personally.
Okay. At what point can both pen tester and ethical hacker perform their role in an organization?
So generally, an ethical hacker for a larger organization, they'll be performing their role all the time because they'll be hired by the company. They'll be a full-time employee. A penetration tester is more of a contractor and is only working with that company between predetermined dates that's written in the contract, as well as the defined scope in the contract. So think of a pen tester as a contractor that's temporary. An ethical hacker can certainly be temporary, but quite often they're full-time employees for larger companies.
Thank you for your answer, Carl. The next question, does ISO 27001 certification cover ethical hacking, pen testing, and cybersecurity?
So 27001 does not cover it in such a way that where it details like you must have a penetration test, or you must do this, or you must do ethical hacking, or whatever, but it is strongly encouraged. 27001 is very descriptive in certain areas. It could be perceived that you're almost required to have a pen test, but it's not really. However, for clients that either are 27001 certified or want to get 27001 certified, having a pen test is highly encouraged. It makes the audit process easier.
Thank you, Carl. The next question is, apart from the internal policies or regulatory guidelines, how often would you recommend an enterprise conduct a vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, and who should manage the process?
That is a really good question. So I'm going to start backwards. Who should manage the process? So for penetration testing, depending on what business the company is in, we recommend, when I say we, I mean Arrakis, my company, we recommend that the actual client contract holder be the chief legal officer or the attorney, the law firm that represents the company. Because if there is something extremely horrible that comes up, and for some reason you have to go to court, we can claim, as individuals, we can claim attorney-client privileges, which prevent us from answering questions in court. Because again, remember, as a penetration tester, the whole concept is to find vulnerabilities and then protect and issue a report that protects the customer, the client, or the company. But if you're in a legal situation where you're forced to disclose those vulnerabilities in court, and that in court is generally viewed as public knowledge, then you're kind of telling the world that this company is weak, and that's not a good idea if you want repeat business from them. In relation to how often a penetration test should occur, every United States regulation requires it at least annually, and I find that that's a fairly good rhythm of doing it once a year. Of course, a company can do it as often as they want, every other month if they feel like it, but they must do it at least once a year for all regulatory environments. In relation to vulnerability assessments, so running like a tool like Nessus or Qualys or something along those lines, most regulations require at least annually on that. That to me is a mistake. Most companies that I advise and consult with, I tell them, if you're doing it at least monthly, then you have less risk, but realistically, you want to do it as often as you can. For my personal set of clients, we do weekly vulnerability scanning, and we find that that's good. And why we suggest against at least annual vulnerability scanning is because most United States regulations require that you patch vulnerabilities within 30 days of awareness or 30 days of the release of that patch. So if you don't know, if you're even doing monthly scanning, if you're scanning on the 1st and a patch comes out on the 2nd, you really won't know that until you scan again, which would be the next month on the 1st, which could be farther past the regulatory timeline, which could put you in a sanctionable event. You don't want that. That's a great question, by the way.
Thank you, Carl. The next question is, what sort of documentation is needed before, during, and after pen testing?
So again, that's a good question, and again, I'm going to work backwards on that one. The after pen testing, you have to have a report, obviously, that Andrea spoke about, to provide to the customer. But before pen testing is the critical part. You want to have a rock solid contract that goes into details, covers every minute thing. So for example, the contracts I have, I say, we're going to do an external pen test not to exceed 50 IP addresses. And then those IP addresses have to be declared in writing from the customer that wants a pen test done. Anything over 50 IP addresses increases the cost, and that's all in the contract. And then we validate those IP addresses that the customers put in writing. And if we find out that the customer is saying, hey, yeah, these IP addresses are all mine, and then we validate and find out that he threw in 10 IP addresses that belong to his competitor, well, now we're breaking the law, because if we were to just go test those IP addresses without validating first, then we're basically acting like a bad actor. So in relation to before pen testing, you want to have a rock solid contract. I always suggest that you get at least 50% of the funds up front to show commitment. You also want to have in your contract, before you do the pen test, you want to have in your contract legal wording that says that the company will not hold you liable for any of your activities. So while it's never the intention of the pen testers to crash a system, I mean, any script kiddie could do a denial of service attack. They're so easy. So you want to have, so maybe the pen tester doesn't have the intention of crashing the system, but accidentally does it. If that affects the company in a bad way, the company needs to accept responsibility for that and not sue the penetration tester. For example, it's if you're doing anything with a physical, like you're trying to break into a building, a client building, you also want to have what I call a permission slip. So it's not the contract, it's an independent permission slip that says the penetration tester is allowed to break into this building to see if it's possible. Because if that penetration tester gets caught, then they could be arrested because the police are not going to know why this person's trying to break into this building. If there's any contracts on that, all they are going to see is somebody breaking into a building and they're going to arrest them. If you have a permission slip, then you can state things on there like Carl Carpenter is allowed to break into this building between these times on these dates. And if you catch him or something along those lines, then please call this number right away. And that's the client who is allowed to basically authenticate that slip. And obviously, if you have that situation, you want to ensure that if you're going to do something late at night, that the person's actually going to answer their phone, that it's not on sleep mode or something along those lines. An example of a penetration testing occurring that was not necessarily did not necessarily have a good contract in place or did not necessarily have a permission slip is the two guys that were arrested in Oklahoma for attempting to break into a courthouse. They were caught, they were arrested, and they spent a couple months in jail. Because the contract was not well written, they didn't have a permission slip, and so on. And the unfortunate part about that is the state of Oklahoma was the client, and they're also the people who arrested them.
Thank you very much, Carl. Due to time limitations, this was our last question. Thank you, Andreas and Carl, for presenting today, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Please be informed that this session is recorded and it will be posted on our website and YouTube channel along with the slides of the presentation. Thank you very much to all of you.